Okay, our most recent share, the recording didn't work live, so I'm recording it again. We got up to 111A6, Kufiyat Aleph Ahmad Aleph towards the bottom, about 10 lines up from the bottom. It's 111A6 at the top. But just before we start, the Gemara, a few lines above, mentioned that the Rabbi Abba Bar Mamal, the Gemara says, Hahu b'nefelim hu diksiv, that miscarried fetuses are going to come back to we'll have Techiyas Hameisim. So just 2 points about that. One point is there is a question, and it comes up sometimes in the shaila of abortion. At what point does a fetus get an neshama, or does a fetus not get an neshama until the time of birth? Is it from conception? Is it from 40 days once it's considered viable? Because let's say the halachos in regard to a miscarriage before 40 days, it's not considered that it was a viable fetus. There'd be different, and after 40 days, it is a viable fetus. So differences would be in the Hilchos Nida. Also for, let's say, if that would have been the firstborn, if the first, so I guess nowadays we would call, if it was before the 40 days, we'd call it a chemical pregnancy because it wasn't really a fetus yet. Then if that was the mother's first pregnancy, and if it was before 40 days, if she get pregnant again, then that one would be a bechor because it would be petarachem. So there are different things about that. So I think Moshe Feinstein, some discussed that it might depend on when a fetus, or if a fetus at all gets a neshama. According to this, it seems that they would. Second point is, we said that Amaratzim, ignoramuses, don't get Techiyas Hameisim. So what about the fetus? So it's an interesting medrash in the famous song Neshamala by A.B. Rottenberg and Mordechai ben David, that the medrash that the fetus has a malach that teaches the fetus all of Torah while it's in the womb, and then right before it's born, the angel touches him under the nose, and they forget the Torah. So it could be that fetuses don't have a din of Amaretz because they're learning Torah. Okay, so Rabbi Lazar, tzaddikim shebachutzaretz and mechayim. According to Rabbi Lazar, the tzaddikim and chutzaretz don't have Techiyas Hameisim because he says that there's only Techiyas Hameisim if you're near Israel. So Rabbi La Yidei Gilgal. Rabbi La says through rolling, the bones are going to roll until Eretz Yisrael. Maskef Rav Abba Sala Rabba, Rav Abba Sala the Great said. So Rashi says about this rolling is that the bones are going to roll. So it seems like the body, that the flesh isn't there yet, and the bones roll. And so the Techiyas Hameisim would be, so I guess the bones are rolling the Techiyas Hameisim. So the bones would get to roll for the Techiyas Hameisim, and then when the Techiyas Hameisim happens, then they're going to get flesh on the bones also. We should not forget the pasuk in was it Perek Lamed Zayin in Yecheskel about the Yatzamos Yiveshos, the dry bones that came back to life. Which again, that isn't literal according to the Rambam. Maskif Rabbi Abba Sala Rabba Gilul Tzadikim Tzarahu, for the tzadikim to roll, that's a pain. Why do they have to suffer this rolling? Rabbi Abai says that tunnels are going to be made underground. So Rashi says they're going to stand on their feet and walk in the tunnels to Eretz Yisrael, and in Eretz Yisrael, they're going to bubble up out of the ground. So from the way it sounds, according to Rashi, is that it seems if they're walking, then there's some type of Techiyas Hameisim underground, because else how would they walk? Unless they're zombies, which I don't want to think about that. And so because of these tunnels, it won't be painful. And also in regard to standing upright, and as opposed to rolling, there is actually a Tanchuma, I think in Amor, about certain types of sorcery when King Shaul went to the sorceress to have Shmuel Hanavi been brought to death. The sorcery, the person would come, the dead person who was being brought in the seance, whatever, would come upside down. But because he came right side up, she knew that the person coming was Shaul, was the king, because out of respect, even that comes. So something about right side up versus upside down might be important. a pasuk from Parshas Vaychi. So Sanamim Tamikaratim before Asam. Yaakov asked his sons, carry me out of Mitzrayim and bury me in the Kvura, the burial place of my fathers. Amar Karna Dvar Magav. Karna says there's something that doesn't make sense in this pasuk. We have to understand. Yodeha Yaakov Avinu Shetzedek Amar Haya. Yaakov knew that he was a complete righteous person. V'meitzin shebchutz laaretz chayim lamahi triach hezbanav. And if you die in chutz laaretz, you're still going to have Techiyas Hameisim. Why would he make his children go through all extra bother and effort to bury him in Eretz Yisrael? So he was worried that he wouldn't be zocha for the tunnels. So Karna is saying that implicit in Yaakov's request is this idea of tunnels. The Techiyas Hameisim would apply, but there'd be tunnels, and even coming through the tunnels, it's not as good as Techiyas Hameisim. So maybe if you're in Eretz Yisrael, the Techiyas Hameisim, you come right up right away, and the Techiyah takes place. Here you have to travel, and then Techiyah takes place, or some element of Techiyah takes place, so that you walk up right in the tunnel, and you come up. So it's not as good. Now, some point out that if Mesim Shebchutzarts wouldn't live, what about Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe and Aaron were buried in Chutzart, so they wouldn't have Techiyas Hameisim. It's difficult to consider that. So it could be a couple possible answers is that in Yemos Mashiach, the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael will expand, and so the Hor where Aaron is buried and where Moshe is buried will be considered Eretz Yisrael. There will be Techiyas Hameisim there. Also, I've mentioned several times from Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in Tzion Halo Tishali, which is a poem, but we also say it on Tisha B'Av, in one of the keynotes. He mentions that the Kivrei Tzadikim, like Hor and where Moshe and Aaron are buried, is part of Eretz Yisrael, which is a little bit strange because they weren't allowed to enter Eretz Yisrael. So maybe because later it's going to be Eretz Yisrael, or I think once I explained that the Sanhedrin sits in the Lishkas Hagazis. Obviously, later they were forced to flee or to leave that, or they voluntarily left, so they wouldn't have to put so many people to death. But it could be because of the Torah. According to the Ramban, that the Mishkan was a vehicle that transferred the Har Sinai experience to Eretz Yisrael. It could be Moshe and Aaron well, obviously all the Torah came through Moshe, and Aaron also transmitted Torah. The Gemara in Eruvin, Moshe, Hashem taught it to Moshe, then Moshe would teach it to Aaron, and then Aaron's sons would come in and he would say it again. So could be because of the Torah, they were considered Eretz Yisrael, not because it was literally Eretz Yisrael, but because of the transmission of Torah. So the place where they were was considered a continuation of Har Sinai, which according to the Ramban was transferred to Eretz Yisrael. It's not a pshat, but the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi does say that. Kyoto whatever to Omer, similar to what we just read about Yaakov, you could say about Yosef. I asked Yosef has been Israel. Yosef made his brothers take an oath, the sons of Israel, meaning the sons of literally Yaakov, whose name was also Israel, that they had to, when after the 400 years were up and Bnei Israel would leave Mitzrayim, bring his bones back up. I'm Rabbi Chanina, Dvar Begav. Rabbi Chanina says there's something that we have to understand in the pasuk that doesn't make so much sense. Yosef Pa'as Moshe Tzaddik Gomer Haya. Yosef knew that he was a completely righteous tzaddik. And if the dead in Eretz Yisrael in Chutz La'aretz are going to have Techiyas Hameisim, why did he bother them and go through the difficulty to travel 400 parsos, a very large distance? So the answer is Shem lo yitzkel chilos. He was worried that maybe he wouldn't merit to have these tunnels, and so he wanted that his bones would have Techiyas Hameisim right away. Shalchal Yechol Rabba. The brothers of Rabbi sent a letter to Rabbi. He was in Babel, and they were in Eretz Yisrael, and they wanted to convince him to move to Eretz Yisrael. So they mentioned this vort that Yaakov knew he was a tzaddik, but why did he want to be buried in Eretz Yisrael? So he'd have Techiyas Hameisim, but they were not to tell Rabbi that he should move here before he dies. Ilfa Mosif Dvarm. Ilfa, who was one of his brothers, added, besides this message, added the following thing. I'm not sure if it was his brother, but there was someone in Eretz Yisrael who was very pained for about a certain woman. He wanted to marry her. He wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael and marry her. For whatever reason, I know we just learned a couple of weeks ago that one spouse can force the other spouse to go to Eretz Yisrael, but for whatever reason, if he was going to leave, he was going to stay in Chutz La'aretz. Kevan Sheshama Kazos. Once you heard this thing that it's better not to have to go in the tunnels for Techiyas Hameisim, Gilgabatz V'Diyav Moso. He suffered a little bit all by himself till he died. He never got married. Why he didn't get married? It's a very big mitzvah to get married, but I know sometimes from personal experience it's hard to find the person. But he didn't get married so that the rest of his life, so he wouldn't leave Eretz Yisrael. So even though okay, wait. So hold on a second. So because of that, he didn't leave Eretz Yisrael, because if he was left Eretz Yisrael, he would have been buried in Eretz Yisrael. So he didn't leave Eretz Yisrael and didn't get married because he wanted to not have to go through the tunnels. And then the next point, and even though Rabbi, you are a great sage, so it seems that you're one of the leaders in Babel. If you would come here, you're going to be able to learn better because you're going to have a Rebbe to learn from. And if you want to say that in Eretz Yisrael there is no Rav, unless there was a Rav in Babel that he was learning, but from the statement Rabbo, it makes it so. It could be that he had a Rebbe in Babel, and maybe he wouldn't have a Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael. And if you think you wouldn't have a Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, Yesh Rav, you do. Umano Rabbi Yochanan. And who is he, Rabbi Yochanan? You'll be able to learn from Rabbi Yochanan. But if you don't come up to Eretz Yisrael, you should be worried about take care of three things. Al tarba b'yeshiva, don't sit too much. Yeshiva kashla tachtanias, because sitting too much causes hemorrhoids. Al tarba b'amida, shamida kashla leiv, don't stand too much because standing is bad for your heart. Al tarba b'alicha, don't walk too much. Shalicha kashla einayim, because walking is bad for your eyes. Ela shlish b'yeshiva, shlish b'amida, shlish b'hilach. So spend a third of your time sitting, a third standing, and third walking. Kol yeshiva she'eni masmicha, amida nochemena. And if you're sitting that doesn't have, you're leaning on something, then it's better to stand than to sit that way. So Gemara right away asks, Amida Salkadaitach is really, it's better to stand than sit without the something to lean on. We said standing too much is bad for the heart. Ala Yeshiva is returned to Kufir Aleph Amud Aleph She'ein Basmicha Amida Sheyish Basicha Nochemera. If you're sitting on something like a stool or a bleachers, a bench that doesn't have a back, then it's better to stand while you're leaning on something than to sit where you have to support yourself. So I know nowadays they say these exercise balls are not, but these balls to sit on are good because they engage your core and this and that. According to this Gemara, that's not so good. They also said Yitzchak v'Shimon v'Oshia Amru davar echad. So they sent to Rabbi that Yitzchak and Shimon and Oshia said a certain psak halacha Rabbi Yehuda befrados. The halachas like Rabbi Yehuda in regard to female mules. The Tani, because we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says pirda shetava. If a female mule wanted to mate, ein marbina lolo sus v'chamor elamina. You can't breed her with a horse or with a donkey. It rather has to be a mule. So a mule comes from a horse and a donkey. And the halacha is, it's Gemara in Chulin. It's actually a halacha of kilayim. Shatnez, wool and linen clothes is forbidden. You can't plant different species together. You can't tie a donkey and a horse, or a donkey and a ox together to lead a wagon or a plow, because those are two different species. So those are also different types of kilayim. So if a horse and a donkey mated and they had a female mule, so the question is, in regard to kilayim, what's halacha? So normally for this, we would follow what the mother of the animal is. So if the mother of this mule was a horse, then this mule is a horse, and you could bring a male horse to breed in it. If the mother of this mule was a donkey, then you could bring a male donkey to breed with this mule, because for the animals in Kalayim, we would follow the mother. But Rabbi Yehuda wasn't sure that we only worry about the mother, what the species of the mother is in regard to Kalayim. Maybe it would follow for what the father was also. So if we'd worried about the father also, then it might be a different child, because let's say it was a male horse and a female donkey would be different than a male donkey and a female horse. But Rabbi Yehuda says, we can't give a horse like its mother was, but not his father, or a donkey that its father was, but not its mother, is elamina. You can only give another mule to mate with it, because we're worried that about Kilayim, because he was worried that we don't only follow the species of the mother in regard to Kilayim. So you have to use a male mule to mate with this female mule. You're not allowed to breed it with a horse or a donkey. And who is this? Yitzchak, Shimon, and Oshia. Amar Yitzchak bar Yitzchak. Amar Rav Nachman zeh. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said Yitzchak zeh Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Yitzchak, referred to in this letter as Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Shimon zeh Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Amri la Reish Lakish. Shimon is either Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, or some say it was Reish Lakish, whose name was also Shimon ben Lakish. And Oshia is a Rabbi Oshia bar Rabbi. Oshia was Rabbi Oshia bar Rabbi. Rabbi Lazar. Ami Aretz Ein Chayim. Rabbi Lazar says, Ami Aretz, people who don't know Torah aren't going to come back in Techiyas Hameisim. So I mentioned at the beginning that in regard to the fetuses, because from this Gemara, Ami Aretz Ein Chayim. So a fetus, when did fetus learn Torah? So an answer I gave was that there's a medrash that they learn Torah in the womb with the Malach. Shenemar Meisim Bal Yichyu. They are dead. These people who don't know Torah are dead, never to come to life. Taninami Hachabi and Fabraisa that also has the same idea. Meisim Bal Yichyu. The people who don't learn Torah are like dead, who are never going to live. Yachal Lakol. You might think that all dead aren't going to live. Tamalama Refarim by Yakumu. People who made themselves weak aren't going to get up. And Marapa Outsman Medivar Torah Kosmadaber, from someone who makes himself weak or distances himself from learning Torah. That's what it's talking about. So only people who learn Torah will have Techiyas Hameisim. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan l'nicha l'marayhu de Amar luhu hachi. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Lazar, my master is not happy that you said this. Now, who's the master? It might be the Rabbanu Shalom. No, just say that the proper pshat in the pasuk is that if you worship avodah zarah, you won't have Techiyas Hameisim. But just because you didn't learn Torah, you still have Techiyas Hameisim. Amar le, Rabbi Lazar says mikra echad darish. Okay, you can say that, but I have a different pasuk that from that I learned that you only have Techiyas Hameisim if you learn Torah. Tiksiv ki talk oros talacha v'eretz efraim tapil. The dew of light is your dew, but the land of the Rephaim I will fall. Torah, whoever uses the light of Torah or Torah Mechayev, the light of Torah will make him alive, meaning in Techiyas Hameisim, or Torah Mechayev. And whoever does not use the light of Torah, light of Torah is not going to give him back to life. But Rabbi Lazar saw that Rabbi Yochanan was still very troubled that Rabbi Lazar was excluding non-Talmidei Chachamim from Techiyas Hameisim. Amar le, Rabbi Lazar said to Rabbi Lazar said to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Matzosam Takana Min Torah. Rabbi, don't worry, I found in the Chumash itself, not just from Nevi'im, something that Amaratzim can do, and they could still, even though they don't know Torah, they can get a share. They could get Techiyas Hameisim. And this we just read recently, Parshas Veschanan. Those of you who cling to Hashem, your God, you're all alive today. So first of all, he's talking about Chaim Kolchem Hayom, that you're going to have Techiyas Hameisim. But how is it possible to cling to the Shechina? But it says that Hashem, your God, is a fiery, consuming fire. So the pshat is anyone who marries his daughter after a Talmid Chacham, or you deal in business for Talmidei Chachamim, or you let Talmidei Chachamim benefit from your property, it's as if you are clinging to the Shechina. So we've mentioned that there's a famous Shimon Amasuni with Darshan al the Essen, that S comes to include something. When he got to Es Hashem al Kachatira, he stopped. Who else could you include with of God or fear of God, until Rabbi Akiva said it includes Tamid Chachamim. So similar drasha here, we're saying that how can you cling to Hashem? So no, if you cling to Tamid Chachamim, it's as if you're clinging to Hashem. So how do you cling to Tamid Chachamim? You marry your daughter to them, so they're not alone. You help them in business. So Rashi says helping them in business is basically you take their money and do the business with their money, and they get the profits, so that they don't have to take time away from learning Torah. I think some also say that you give them money and they do the work, but they get to keep the profits. So maybe because they don't have capital, you're giving them the capital. I don't know if they might be returning the capital, but they get to, even though they didn't have capital to do the business, but they could make profit with this. It might also include tzedakah, even though it doesn't sound like here because you're doing business with them. Now, I've mentioned that there's something called the Yisachar Zvulun partnership. So Yisachar Shevet learned, and Zvulun were merchants. They would go by this. They were on the shore, and they would travel, I guess, for businesses. So because they didn't have time to learn Torah with other traveling, so they supported Yisachar, and they got some of the reward for that. So the source for that is the Medrash. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The Gemara doesn't mention it, but possibly that's another explanation. Now, another thing just to point out about this, the pasuk says, "V'atem hadveikim Hashem Elokechem." The Gemara says when it says Hashem Elokechem means the Shechina. Danny explained, according to the Kabbalah, the Shechina isn't Hashem itself. This is Kabbalah, so I could be saying it over wrong. I hope I'm not. But we would just say that the word Shechina is talking, we can't cling to the Rebbeinu Shalom. According to the Kabbalah, Hashem created something called the Shechina. The Shechina is like a mother. Hashem himself is like the father, but the Shechina that he created is like the mother, and the mother nurture. We get our nurturing through that, just like a baby gets fed and nursed from the mother. So the Kabbalah says that. What exactly means, I don't know, but I just want to point out that the Gemara uses the word Shechina for Hashem Elokechem. But Danny did tell us that Hashem Elokechem, Hashem is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and Elokechem. So together there's L'Shem Yichud, he said. So there's some unification of that, and that's how good things come to us when we do mitzvos. You strengthen these different connections from the upper worlds to the lower worlds. Similar to this, we have to what we just said about we can't cling to Hashem, so cling to Talmidei Chachamim. There's another pasuk, Le'avas Hashem Elokach lo davka ba. You want to love Hashem and cling to Him. That's at the end of Nitzavim, I believe. Is it possible to cling to the Shechina? Ella kol hamasi b'til tam chacham l'tam chacham. If you marry your daughter to a tam chacham, v'osa pragmati tamid chachamim, or if you deal in business for tamid chachamim, v'hamahana tamid chachamim nechasav, or if you help tamid chachamim from your property, what you own, the pasuk considers it as if you're clinging to the Shechina. I just noticed, in regard to marry your daughter to a Talmid Chacham. In regard to doing business, it's written in plural. May not be enough to, in the last few years, there's a thing, adopt a kola. A shul will raise money and send it to a different kola in Eretz Yisrael. So here, if you're Mahana Talmidei Chacham and also Pramata Talmidei Chachamim, it doesn't seem that you're helping one Talmid Chacham. You have to help. It's written in the plural. So I don't know if that means you have to help multiple. Rabbi Yosef says that tzaddikim are going to bubble up and come up in Yerushalayim. So they will pop up from the city like the grass of the land. And the word city means Yerushalayim. I will protect this city. So does this mean tzaddikim? So before we said, it seemed if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you have Techiyas Hameisim right there. So if a tzaddik was buried outside of Yerushalayim, are they going to go in the tunnel to Yerushalayim and pop up there? It seems that even going in the tunnel isn't necessarily the most ideal thing. Or is this talking about the tzaddikim from Chutz La'aretz? Once they're going in tunnels, they won't just, as soon as they get into the boundary of Eretz Yisrael, they'll have Techiyas Hameisim and pop up, but they'll keep going tunnels to Yerushalayim. What exactly it means, I'm not sure. They bring here from Rashi in Sanhedrin, and the last paragraph where it talks about Techiyas Hameisim, that find it here. No, it's not fine. No. No. I know the Art Scroll has in a footnote, I don't see that Rashi right now from Sanhedrin, that it's talking about tzaddikim from Chutz La'aretz, they will come back. Their Techiyas Hameisim will be in Yerushalayim itself. Rabbi Yosef said, "Asidim tzaddikim sheyamdu b'Yerushalayim." When the tzaddikim come back to life, they're going to come back to life in their clothes that they were buried in. It seems that's what Tosfos says, which are tachrichem. But Tosfos points out that the Yerushalmi made it sound like Rabbi told Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we mentioned 6 weeks ago or whatever, about when Rabbi died, he told his sons not to put so many tachrichem on him because it seems that was going to cover his regular clothes. We don't know. Rabbi Akiva Eiger gives a makor also. We bury in a talus, also the men in a talus. The minhag is we cut off the whole tzitzis from one of the corners, so it's a puzzle talus. If you literally have Techiyas Hameisim in what you were buried with, I don't know why we would bury them in a puzzle talus. That wouldn't be a good thing, unless we only do that since we don't have tchelas, which is a separate machlokas, because we lost the Masorah what tchelas is. There's a story that the Vilna Gaon requested that they bury him in his kosher talus, and the Chaver Kadisha did that. They put him in his regular talus that was kosher, and then something happened, and the tzitzis ripped in between the time that they prepared it and before he was buried. So in the end, he wasn't, even though he wanted to be, and they followed his instructions. Something happened and it wasn't. What does it mean? I don't know. Kavachomer mechita. We learned this from a kavachomer from a wheat kernel. Machita shenikra ruma. A wheat kernel is buried naked with nothing around it, just one little kernel of wheat. Yotzav kamalavushim. It comes out. It grows with many different coverings. There's bran, there's chaff, there's all these things over it. Tzadikim that are buried in their clothes, they certainly will come back to life with clothes. Yosef said, Yisrael is going to, you're going to have nice loaves of bread that grow on trees and nice clothes, wool growing on trees. Shnemar Yehi Pisas Barba Aretz. There'll be a lot of pisa of grain in the land. And Rashi points out how the word pisas could refer to a nice loaf of bread and also clothes. Taner Rabbanim, we learned in the Brisa, Yehi pisas barba arts brosh harim. There's going to be a lot of grain in the land on the top of mountains. Amru, they said, Asida chisha titzamer b'kedekav ol brosh harim. A wheat stalk is going to eventually grow tall like a palm tree, a date palm, and go up as high as mountains. I'm going to say this is a bad thing because it's going to be difficult to harvest it. Tamalomar, the pasuk says, Yirash kol on perio. Its produce is going to make a noise from the wind, I guess, like the cedars of Lebanon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu maybe ruach mebeis kenazaf. Hashem is going to send a wind from his storage place where he keeps wind and all this other stuff. Menash ba'alam mishar salter. It's going to shake it and cause its fine flour to come down from this tree. Person is going to come to his field and bring a handful of this wheat, and from that he will have support for himself and for his whole household. In Parshas Azinu, you're going to have chita that's as fat as kidneys. They said a wheat kernel is eventually going to be as big as the two kidneys of a very large ox. The Altisma, and don't think that this is not possible to happen. There was a certain fox that dug a den, its home in a turnip in Eretz Yisrael. Ushkaluhu, and even though he hollowed it out, the fox hollowed it up to live in it. They weighed what was left, multiple shishim litrin belitr shaltziporim, and they measured that it was 60 litrin in the tzipori litrin, which is a heavier weight than the other weight. So it was this tremendously large turnip. Tanya, so Eretz Yisrael is going to produce this great amounts of giant produce that's going to be very good. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Amar, Rabbi Yossi, Ma'isa b'Shichin be'achad she'nech l'avim shel Shabbat echalal. In the city of Shichin, there was a person whose father left him 3 stalks of mustard growing. One branched out, and there were 9 cabin, it's like a bushels of mustard from that branch. The what had branched off, 8 of sikech bosukas yotrim, and the wood of that offshoot was able to cover the hut of a pottery maker. Excuse me. Rav Shimon bar Tachlifa. Rav Shimon Tachlifa says, "Kalach shall prove hinechlo abba." There was a certain his father left him a stalk of cabbage. By Olin v'Yarden b'Basulam, they would go up and down on a ladder because it was such a huge cabbage in order to harvest it. V'dam ein of tishtachamer. Another pasuk in Hazinu says, the blood of a grape you're going to drink, good wine. So that's the way we're translating. Dam means blood, but the blood of a wine, we're going to darshan, it means a bunch of things. They said, Lo kolam haza olam haba. This world is not like the world to come. So meaning the world to come, I guess, in Yemos HaMashiach. It doesn't mean the olam haneshamos because there's no physical stuff in that world. But when Mashiach comes, it's going to be, the world is going to be different than this. Ha'olam hazeh yesh. So there is an opinion, I think it's Shmuel, maybe I'm wrong, it's not Shmuel, it's Sanhedrin, that there's no difference between Yemos HaMashiach and now, except Shibud Malchios, that now we're subservient to the other nations. We talked about the 3 oaths or the 6 oaths a few weeks ago, but according to Shmuel, the main thing is that we're going to have Melech HaMashiach is going to be our king, but everything else is going to be the same. It obviously doesn't seem to fit with what Argamar is saying, that that the fruit is going to be much even better, a significant way. Ha'olam has a yesh botzar lives over lidroch. You have to do a lot of effort. I mean, tsar means pain, but you have to. But I think it's more effort to harvest the grapes and then to use to stand on them. They step on them to open them up to get the juice out of the grapes in order to make it into wine. Ha'olam haba, maybe another achas bekarna besvina. And when Mashiach comes, you're going to bring 1 grape in a boat or in a wagon. When Nichab is of his base, he'll leave it in the corner of his house. When Misapek Himeno Kipus Gadol. And basically, from the cartoons, you have a little faucet. You hammer it into the grape, and you'll turn the faucet, and the wine is going to come out of that grape. That's what it sounds like here. The so it's either 1 grape, or it means 1 cluster of grapes. Because it says here that the wood from it. Now, if it's a cluster, there's the wood from the cluster that the grapes are connected to, so that you're going to heat your house with, put it under your oven. But if it literally means 1 grape, I guess those grapes were probably not seedless grapes, so maybe the seeds, the wood from that, you dry out and cook your food with that. Each grape or each cluster will provide a very large amount, 30 garvim of wine. So don't say that just chamer, which is like chamra, which means wine, but elachomer, it's a certain large measurement. You're going to tie your donkey to the vine. I think this is in the brachas of Yaakov to one of his sons, to Asher maybe? No, to Yisachar, I think. There's not going to be any grape vine in Eretz Yisrael that doesn't need a whole city to pick it. That each grapevine is going to be so popular, so you need a whole city. It takes a village to pick a grapevine in order to pick the fruit. And you're gonna to the vine branch, you're gonna tie the kid of the donkey. So a baby donkey and the chakal instruction of Israel. Any regular tree, not a fruit tree, but a regular tree, even the non-fruit trees are going to provide fruits, and you're gonna need two donkeys to load it up. So I guess maybe b'ni, even though it's ben with an extra yud at the end, it might be b'nei, that it's plural, you would need two. V'shema tamar ein bo yain, you might say that the grapes from these non-grapevine trees are not going to have wine. Tamalomer kibes be'en levusho. He's going to launder his clothes in the wine. That wine is obviously you're not going to wash your white shirt in wine, but wine is so plentiful and it's not going to be worth much. You even do your laundry in wine also, but then also wine has a good smell. Sometimes you would sprinkle a little bit on your house, a way of perfuming it, making it smell nice. So I guess maybe it's also a way of making your stuff smell nice. Tamalomer, the Shema Tamar, and you might say it's okay, it's wine, but it's not red wine. Red wine is the best. Tamalomer vidam anavim, the blood is red. So what comes out of these grapes are going to be red. The Shema Tamar Miravan, you might say it doesn't have a punch that to give you alcoholic content. Tamalomer suso. So the word suso implies that it will have powerful, like Rashi says, lashon hasasa, to entice you. Shayayin meitzis sashikor. The wine will entice you with this intoxication properties. Tamar, you might say, okay, it's red. It has the alcoholic content, but maybe it doesn't taste like good wine. Tamalomer, because it's not from a grapevine. Tamalomer chachlili enam yain. You're going to be red-eyed from the wine. Kolchech shatama omer li li. Anyone who chech is also your throat. If you taste it, you say li li, give it to me. Instead of chachlili is one red eyes. Chach, whoever puts it in his throat, li li says, give more to me, give more to me. The Tamerlin army and you might say that it's not like fine wine. Fine wine is good for older people, and not such good wine is good for younger people. I think we see that from Achashverosh, according to the Medrash, that everyone had wine that was older than he was. So Tamalam or Leven Shinayim Michalav. So Uleven Shinayim, white toothed from milk. Altikr Leven Shinayim. Don't say it's Leven Shinayim. Elo Leven Shana. It's good for people who had a lot of years. So for old people, it was good for them. And there's an expression long in the tooth to mean that someone was long. Pasuk to Rabbi Kesuvos, the pasuk of the pshat of that pasuk. We just explained about the wine and the trees. Kias Rav Dimi Amar Amrab Knesset Yisrael K'nei Kadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Dimi said Knesset Yisrael is telling Kadosh Baruch Hu Shalom Rose Menachat Debasis Mechamra. Hint in your eyes that we're better for you than drinking good wine. Not that Hashem needs to drink wine, but that which humans would drink wine to be happy. We make you happier than wine. Tell us that. And show and smile showed us that which is sweeter for us than having milk. I think that's where we got. We'll probably reread this line for the next year.